Hey guys, it's Joel with Taproot Therapy, and this is the emotion recognition log instructions on how to use that, part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, please go back and look at how to use the emotion recognition and regulation log, part 1, as that's important in understanding this video. So once you've done that emotion recognition part 1 log, it should give you some good data to bring into therapy, no matter what modality you're using as a therapist. There's a lot of good information to use there, so I think part 2 is going to be a little bit more vague in how exactly you use those things. One of the things that I think is an important takeaway from part 1 is there an emotion that you're not feeling? You know, if you're never feeling sad, or if you're never feeling angry, I doubt that that's true. You know, there may be times in life that a patient is feeling that and they're not recognizing it, okay? So if I'm afraid all the time, I'm going to go under the assumption that maybe this patient has some places where they want to enforce boundaries in life, or they want to enforce rules and be assertive, but they're just not in touch with the fact that they're actually kind of angry because they're not allowed to do that. They feel afraid. And so, you know, is my mother-in-law living in my house or coming into my house and saying all these things, and I don't feel like I'm allowed to speak up to parents, or I'm not allowed to speak up to mom. You know, is there a dynamic at work where somebody has kind of a fiduciary relationship with me and I don't feel like I'm allowed to point out what's happening? Start looking for places if somebody is coming in with just overwhelming anxiety and panic that doesn't make a ton of sense, where they may actually kind of be angry in their life. If somebody is angry all the time, instead of going into a CBT-like approach and saying, well, you know, notice the thing that is making you angry and why it's making you angry and when it is, maybe come from a place of vulnerability. Make this assumption that what it is that they're not comfortable feeling sad, and that your job as the therapist is going to be helping them become comfortable to be in touch with their vulnerability and to not view it as a bad thing that they have to defend and turn off anytime they're in a vulnerable place. That sometimes instead of saying, you know, F you, they can say, you know what, that hurts my feelings, and still feel like they have worth even though they're acknowledging vulnerability. A lot of people who have anger turned off, sadness turned off, that are presenting with a lot of anger issues, are told that, you know, weakness is bad as a kid, that if you have feelings are bad by proxy, that if you ever do anything where you're weak or you're less than, or you admit that you're hurting, that you don't have any worth, you're not lovable. And so learning to experience sadness and vulnerability is going to be important. A ton of the time, what happens when we're out of touch with sadness or vulnerability is we start to despise it in other people. So sometimes you see people who dislike a certain group or a certain class that's persecuted. They don't like weakness in other people. They're always upset by other people being weak and being victims. A lot of times that person is actually angry at their own capacity to feel sad, at their own capacity to feel hurt and be a victim. So, I mean, that's one of the things that you can kind of do to conceptualize a case with the part 2 emotion worksheet. Another one is that it's important to realize that a lot of times these emotions are things that patients are trying not to feel. And so the protective parts that they're bringing into therapy in IFS language, you know, the symptoms that they're bringing into therapy, are actually ways that they're not feeling these emotions. If you can get a patient comfortable with feeling these emotions, then they don't need the protective part. Just trying to turn the protective part off leaves them without a tool. The part is going to hold on and dig in because it doesn't want to go. It knows that it's needed. For example, if you're working with a patient that has OCD or OCD-like tendencies, the OCD is going to be at its highest when the patient is feeling stressed. And so when you're noticing this obsession cycle, instead of saying, well, I don't need to worry about washing my hands, logically I know that I already washed them, logically I know that they're clean, I don't need to worry about it being dirty, I know that this isn't real, that cognitive trying to turn it off with the thinky brain doesn't really work. It just makes you more obsessive. But when you're able to say, okay, what am I feeling? I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling fear that I'm going to die. I'm feeling fear that I'm going to hurt somebody else and that's going to make me guilty. I'm feeling afraid that I'm going to cause something bad to happen. I'm afraid of my own capacity to hurt other people through negligence. Where is that in my body? Well, my chest is sinking. My shoulders are slumping. I feel kind of pressure behind my eyes. Now you're starting to map that emotion, and you're pushing the patient into the body brain with this, and they're feeling the actual emotion that's underneath the protective part, which in this case is obsession. And when that happens, the protective part realizes that the emotion that it's protecting you from, which in this case is fear, isn't needed. The protective part isn't needed because you're already feeling it, and you're already noticing it, and you're already doing okay. And so the obsession comes down. A lot of times, especially with college students, or people, younger people, there's this. They come in with a goal to drink less. That they don't have a substance dependence, but they have a substance abuse issue where they are drinking 8-9 beers, and they want to be able to go out and have a beer or two and then not lose themselves to it. And one of the things that's important here, that's the symptom, right? So using the same process, drinking the beer is the symptom. Before you go into the bar, slow down. What am I feeling? I'm feeling sad that I'm alone. I'm feeling sad that I don't think I'm going to meet anybody in college, that no one's going to like me if they do meet me. I'm feeling sad that my relationship ended. I feel like I'm not good enough, and that's why the relationship was over. Where is that in my body? It's in the back of my neck. I feel my neck getting tight. I feel my gut getting kind of cold and contracting. I feel a black hole in my chest that's just kind of sucking. I'm going to notice that. I'm going to feel it for a minute. And I figured out where it was in my body, and I figured out why it was there. Okay? So now I can manage this. I'm feeling it. It's not a good feeling, but it is there. And it was underneath whether or not I was going to be aware of it. But now that I'm aware of it, if I go into the bar, I'm going to have 3 beers instead of 8. Because I'm not just going, using that obsessive part to try and, or overusing part to try and turn off that feeling. So that's the way that I like to use this, is that when I am using it with a patient, when I do part 1 with a patient, and they start to become aware of what they're feeling, and we start to figure out what they're not very good at feeling or what kind of feeling is very threatening to them, we can start turning that back on, teaching them that it's okay to feel it, and teaching them to be able to experience it. So this is a good place to start. I hope this exercise is helpful. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, if a patient is going into a state where they cannot feel a feeling, where all of a sudden, sadness just becomes never ending, it's this black hole, it's overwhelming, I want to die if I go there, or anger just becomes a place where you're completely red, all muscles are tense, you can't get out of it, or shame, sadness, whatever the emotion is, if it becomes to that extent, that's a pretty good indicator that you're dealing with a patient that has some sort of trauma. Maybe from childhood they have post-traumatic stress, and that this emotion is stuck, that they're actually reliving something from an earlier point in their life that you're going to have to switch to a modality that treats trauma to deal with. And so when they're feeling like, well, I can't feel the emotion because it's never ending, what that's telling you is that there's a stuck memory there that's been written into the brain wrong with trauma, and that they're reliving. So there's a lot of other resources about trauma I'll post later. I hope that's helpful information. If you're a patient or if you're a therapist, you can always check out more at gettherapybirmingham.com. Take care.